Hello, Ms Mazur's class. Today we're going to finish Christmas in Camelot. Chapter 11, The Crystal Cave. "The secret door," whispered Jack. "Yes," said Annie. Jack dropped the compass into his pack. Then he and Annie scrambled through the bushes and climbed up the rocks to the door. Annie took Sir Lancelot's glass key from around her neck. She slipped the key into the keyhole. She turned the key slowly. Clink. "Yippee," Annie said softly. She pushed open the door. Beyond the door was a huge glittering cave. The floors, walls, and ceilings were made of clear crystal. Jack and Annie stepped inside. The cave was filled with dancing streams of purple light. "It's so bright," whispered Jack. "Where's all the purple light coming from?" "There," said Annie. She pointed to a crack on the far side of the cave. "Let's look." They crossed the cave and peered through the crack into a room. Along the brilliant crystal walls of the room were 4 doorways. In the far corner of the room was a fire. The fire blazed with leaping purple flames. Over the flames hung a gleaming golden cauldron. "There it is," whispered Jack. "Wow," whispered Annie. "The cauldron with the water of memory and imagination," whispered Jack. "I know," whispered Annie. "Let's go." They squeezed through the crack, then walked towards the gleaming cauldron. Jack reached into his pack and pulled out Sir Galahad's silver cup. "The cauldron's too high," said Annie. "We can't get the water." "Here, take this," handing her the cup. "Climb on my back." He bent over, and Annie climbed on piggyback. He stood up shakily. "Hurry," he said. "You're heavy." "I can't reach it," said Annie. "Move closer." Jack staggered forward a few steps. Stretching as far as she could, Annie reached again. She skimmed the water from the top of the bubbling cauldron, filling the silver cup. "Got it," she said. "Now set me down." Annie held the cup with both hands. Jack slowly bent his knees, and Annie climbed carefully off his back. They stared silently for a moment at the water of memory and imagination in the cup. It was clear and shimmering. "Now we can save Morgan," said Annie. Just then, Jack smelled something strange. It was like the smell of rotting seaweed. He heard weird gurgling sounds behind him. He and Annie turned around. A giant, slimy, mud-colored creature crawled out through one of the doorways. The creature was long and scaly like the crocodile, but much, much bigger. It had wings that looked as if it had been spun from 1,000 spider webs. It had glowing red eyes and long, curled claws. The creature opened its jaws. Strands of drool dripped from its sharp, pointed teeth. The creature hissed, and hot blue flames shot from its mouth. Another monster crawled through a different doorway, quickly followed by a third and fourth. "Yikes," said Annie. "The real keepers of the cauldron," whispered Jack. Chapter 12, Fire with Fire. The 4 real keepers of the cauldron crawled closer and closer to Jack and Annie, hissing and snorting blue flame. "What do we do now?" whispered Annie. "I don't know," said Jack. "We're trapped." "I have an idea. Let's drink the water." "What?" "It's the water of memory and imagination, right? So maybe if we drink it, we can imagine a way to escape." "That's crazy," said Jack. The creepers crawled closer, snorting more blue flame and filling the air with their rotten stench. Okay, let's try it. Annie took a sip from the silver cup, then handed it to Jack. His hands trembled as he held the cup to his lips and took a sip. The water tasted sweet, bitter, and spicy all at the same time. Jack gave the cup back to Annie. Now imagine we're saved. Jack closed his eyes. He tried to imagine being saved. He pictured the 4 keepers crawling back through their doorways. Okay, ready to fight? Said Annie. Jack opened his eyes. What? Fight? She set the silver cup on the floor. Now, she said. Suddenly, Jack felt like he had been hit by a bolt of lightning. His fear slipped away. He was filled with strength and fury. Without thinking, he lunged with Annie towards the wood fire underneath the cauldron. They each grabbed 2 long, straight branches. From the edge of the fire. They raised them high in the air. The branches blazed with purple fire like flaming swords. Ah! Jack and Annie shouted. The 4 keepers hissed louder than before. Great balls of fire exploded from their mouths and nostrils. Jack and Annie slashed the air with their fiery weapons, jabbing at the keepers. They fought fire with fire, blue flame with purple flame. Back! Back! They shouted. With each jab and shout, Jack felt stronger and braver. Waving their burning branches, he and Annie drove the keepers towards the wall. The keepers' blue flames grew weaker and weaker, as if they were running out of fuel. Finally, one by one, each keeper slunk back into its doorway from which it had come. When all the keepers had disappeared, Jack and Annie placed a burning branch in front of each of the 4 doorways to keep the monsters from coming back out. Then they brushed off their hands. Let's go, said Annie coolly. Jack nodded. Annie carefully picked up the silver cup of water. Then she and Jack squeezed through the narrow crack and strode through the bright crystal cave. They stepped out into the daylight. The glass key was still in the keyhole. Jack calmly locked the door behind them. He handed the key to Annie. Then Jack's knees gave way and he sank to the ground. Chapter 13. Your horses are waiting. I don't believe what just happened, said Jack. What part don't you believe, said Annie, holding the silver cup. He laughed and shook his head. I don't believe any of it, he said. Annie laughed too. That was cool, huh? Jack pushed his glasses into place and stared at her. Seriously, what just happened in there? I imagined us fighting the keepers with flaming swords, said Annie. What did you imagine? Jack shrugged. I just imagined the keepers going back into their holes, he said. Good, said Annie. We both got what we imagined. Yes, said Jack, smiling. But what you imagined made a much better story. A shriek of fury came from inside the cave. Yikes, said Annie. Let's get out of here, said Jack. He scrambled to his feet, and together they climbed back down over the big rocks to the thicket. Annie moved very carefully to keep from spilling the water in the cup. When they came to the thicket, Jack pulled out Sir Percival's compass. If we came west to get here, then we have to go east to get back. East is that way. As they started into the wild growth, Jack went first so he could clear the way for Annie. Without talking, they pushed steadily through the trees and bushes. moving further and further from the keeper's cave. Finally, they heard the music in the distance. They walked closer and closer towards the sound until they stepped back into the green glade. The winged dancers were still there, dancing their magic. Jack's heart raced. He wanted to join them again, but he knew that if he did, he would never escape their dance. "Look," said Annie, "the knights are awake." Sir Lancelot, Sir Galahad, and Sir Percival were standing just beyond the circle of dancers. They were buckling on their swords. "Hi," called Annie. "Guess what? We got it." The knights walked shakily towards Jack and Annie. They still looked thin and tired, but color had returned to their cheeks. "We have the water of memory and imagination," said Annie. She held up the silver cup. The knights smiled. "Now we just have to get it back to Camelot." "We would like to help you out," said Sir Lancelot, "but it seems we have lost our 3 horses." "No, you haven't," said Annie. "Your horses are waiting for you." "They're on the other side of the hill," said Jack. Jack and Annie led the knights over the hill. On their way, Jack picked up the red velvet cloak. When they came to the meadow, they saw the 3 horses. The horses cantered over to the knights. As Sir Lancelot stroked the mane of the black horse, he turned to Jack and Annie. "You can both ride back to Camelot with me," he said. "Thanks," they said. Jack fastened the red cloak around his neck. Sir Lancelot helped them onto the back of the horse and then climbed on himself. Annie sat behind Lancelot. She held on to the knight with her right hand and held the silver cup in her left hand. "Can you carry the water without spilling it?" Jack asked her, worried. "I'll try," she said. Sir Galahad mounted the brown horse, and Sir Percival climbed on the gray horse. Then the 3 knights started through the pale green meadow. "Careful, careful," Jack whispered to Annie. "I got it, I got it." When they came to the iron gates, the knights drew their swords. "Open the gates in the name of King Arthur of Camelot," he called, though he still sounded hoarse. The knight's deep voice carried an amazing strength. The iron gate slowly swung open. Sir Lancelot urged his horse on. The guards watched silently as the knights passed by them and started across the bridge. The 3 horses trod in single file over the wooden planks. Again, Jack was amazed by the difference between this world and the other world. There it was dark and freezing and foggy. The red cloak flopped in the bitter wind. As the horses stepped off the bridge, they each neighed loudly. "Oh, wow," whispered Annie. Sitting high on a rock, in a swirl of fog, was the white stag. Chapter 14, Return. The 3 knights gazed in wonder at the white stag. "Here, take this," Annie said to Jack. She handed him the silver cup. Then she slipped off the back of Lancelot's horse and ran to the stag. "Thanks for coming for us," she cried, throwing her arms around his neck. The 3 knights looked at Jack. "That's the white stag," he said. "He brought us here." "Are you wizards?" Sir Percival asked in a hushed voice. "No, just ordinary kids," said Jack. "But I know he's magic. We got here from Camelot in no time at all. I guess he's come to take us back." "Then you must go with him," said Sir Lancelot. "You will have a much faster journey, I can assure you." Sir Lancelot held the silver cup as Jack slipped down from the black horse. Then Jack took the cup and carefully climbed onto the back of the stag behind Annie. He held the cup with both hands as the stag stood up. "Tell King Arthur we will return to Camelot first night of the new year, said Sir Lancelot. Farewell, Jack and Annie. Godspeed. Same to you, Annie said. Have a safe trip, said Jack. The knights solemnly bowed. The white stag blew out a puff of frosty air. Then he started down the mountainside. When the stag came to the base of the mountain, he took off again like a white comet. The red cloak billowed around Jack and Annie, keeping them warm and safe. The stag dashed across the wintry fields. He ran past quiet stables and thatched huts. He ran past flocks of sheep and herds of goat asleep in the meadow. He leapt over frozen streams and stone walls and hedgerows. The stag ran on and on through the starry night until he brought Jack and Annie back to the dark castle grounds of Camelot. He walked over the frozen grass of the outer courtyard. He came to a halt near the grove below the treehouse. He knelt in the grass, and Jack and Annie climbed off his back. Miraculously, the silver cup still brimmed with water from the cauldron. Not a drop had spilled. We better leave the cloak here, said Jack, so I don't trip on it. Jack carefully set the cup on the ground. Annie helped him unbutton the red velvet cloak from around his neck. Then she draped it over the stag's back. To keep you warm, she whispered to him, and thanks for everything. Yeah, thanks, said Jack. Goodbye. The white stag stared at them with his mysterious amber eyes. He nodded once. Then he turned and headed into the darkness. Jack picked up the cup. Come on, he said. He started walking quickly through the courtyard. Careful, careful, said Annie. I got it, said Jack. They crossed the drawbridge to the inner courtyard of the castle, then pushed open the giant arched doors. The great hall was just as they had left it, dimly lit, freezing cold. King Arthur, Queen Guinevere, and the Knights of the Round Table, and Morgan were all still frozen and silent. What do we do now? Let's try putting a drop of water on each of them. Morgan first, she said. Okay, come on. Holding his breath, he kept his eyes on the cup. Jack walked carefully to the round table. Suddenly, his left foot stepped on the shoelace of his right sneaker, and he stumbled. Jack, yelled Annie. Jack tried to regain his balance, but it was too late. He fell to the floor. The silver cup slipped from his hands. Chapter 15, Christmas Magic. Jack and Annie watched in horror as the water from the cup splashed over the stone floor. It trickled into cracks between the stones and disappeared. Jack scrambled to the cup. He picked it up. It was completely empty. Oh no, Jack moaned. He sat back and put his head in his hands. Camelot will never wake up now, he thought. The legend will end forever. Jack, said Annie, look. Jack raised his head, pushed his glasses back in place. A golden cloud was rising from between all the stones on the floor. The clouds spread quickly throughout the great hall, filling the room with wonderful smells, the scent of cedar smoke and evergreen, of roses and almonds. The cloud rose up and up, then wafted out through the upper windows of the hall. Suddenly, a white dove flew through one of the windows. It soared across the dark room like a bright light, then swooped back out into the night. Soft, gentle laughter came from the end of the hall. The laughter grew louder. Jack saw King Arthur and Queen Guinevere looking at each other. They were laughing. The Knights of the Round Table were laughing too. Best of all, Jack saw Morgan smiling at him and Annie. Jack, Annie, come here, she called. She held out her arms. Morgan, cried Annie. She ran to Morgan and threw her arms around the enchantress. Jack stood up, still holding the empty cup. He ran to Morgan and hugged her too. "We did what the Christmas night told us to do," Annie said. "We brought back the water of memory and imagination." "But I dropped the cup," said Jack, "and spilled all the water." But the water made a gold cloud, and everything came back to life. Morgan laughed with amazement. "You have just returned from the other world?" she asked. "Yes. A white stag brought us back," said Jack. He turned to King Arthur. "Your Majesty, we have good news. Your knights are safe. Sir Lancelot said to tell you they will be home before the first night of the new year." The king looked bewildered. "You found them?" "Yes, and they're all fine," said Annie. "Here." Jack handed the silver cup to the king. "Please give this back to Sir Galahad. And this to Sir Lancelot." She took the glass key from around her neck and gave it to King Arthur. "Oh, and this to Sir Percival," said Jack. He pulled the wooden compass box from his pack and gave it to the king. At first, King Arthur was too stunned to speak. Then he clapped his hands and laughed joyfully. "Thank you," he said to Jack and Annie. The knights at the round table all cheered. "Ring the bells," King Arthur shouted. "Call the people of Camelot to the castle. They have already gathered outside the doors, your Majesty," said the page. "Bring them in," said King Arthur. "We must rejoice together." Queen Guinevere smiled at Jack and Annie. Her eyes sparkled now. "Once again, you have helped save Camelot," she said. "Thank you very much." "You're welcome," said Jack and Annie. Then Jack heard the sounds of children talking and laughing. He turned to see a crowd of people streaming through the arched doorway. They carried candles, a giant fir tree, and bogs of holly and pine. Musicians followed them with stringed instruments. As everyone started to decorate the hall, the musicians started playing and singing a beautiful Christmas carol. "Jack," said Annie, "look." The white stag was standing in the arched doorway. Jack turned excitedly to Morgan. "See the white stag? He took us all the way to the other world. See him?" Morgan smiled. "Yes, I do see him," she said, "and now I see everything." Jack looked back at the doorway. The stag was gone. In his place was an old man with a long white beard. He held a staff and wore a flowing red cloak, the same cloak Jack and Annie had worn on their quest. "Who's that?" Jack said. "That is Merlin, the magician," said Morgan. "It was Merlin who invited you here. I see that now." "Merlin?" said Jack. He sent us the royal invitation?" "Yes," said Morgan. "Then he put the rest of us under a spell, and he carried you to the other world." "No," said Annie, "the Christmas night put you under a spell, and the white stag carried us to the other world." Morgan smiled. "Merlin was both the Christmas night and the white stag. Remember, he's a magician, not a mortal. He can change his shape whenever he wishes." "Oh, wow," whispered Annie. "Why did Merlin do these things?" Merlin was angry when King Arthur banished magic from Camelot. "I see now he finally took matters into his own hands." "How?" asked Jack. "He knew King Arthur would send no more knights to the other world for the water of memory and imagination. So I assume he brought you to Camelot, hoping that you would offer to go instead." "Why did he want us to go?" asked Annie. "Merlin has often heard my tales of your adventures in the treehouse. He knows you both have a great desire to fight for the good, and he knows you use the gift of imagination very well." Those are two special qualities needed to succeed in any quest. Jack and Annie looked back at Merlin. From across the room, the white-bearded magician smiled at them. He raised his staff, then he slipped out the door. Jack looked around the great hall. All the candles and torches were lit now. A fire blazed in the hearth. The magicians were playing. Everyone was singing. The room glowed with warm firelight and rosy faces. At last, Christmas in Camelot was just as Jack imagined it would be. The spell of the dark wizard had broken. The great hall was filled with beauty, love, joy, and light. Chapter 16, Welcome Home. Wake up, Jack, said Annie. Jack opened his eyes. He was lying in the dark on the wooden floor of the treehouse. Through the windows, he saw the cloudy sky above Frog Creek Woods. Time to go home. Oh, I must have fallen asleep, said Jack. I had the most incredible dream. I dreamed that we went to Camelot. It was Christmas, and Merlin... It wasn't a dream, said Annie. It was real. You fell asleep at the round table during the party. King Arthur carried you to the treehouse, and I made the wish for us. Seriously, he whispered. Seriously, she said. Jack, Annie. Their mom called in the distance. Coming, Annie shouted. Out the treehouse window, she looked at Jack. Let's go. I mean, seriously, it really happened, Jack asked. Yes, really. She held up the royal invitation. See? Proof. Oh yeah, he whispered. This time the M standed for Merlin, not Morgan. Thanks, Merlin, he said softly, picked up his backpack, and then he and Annie started down the rope ladder and headed home. By the time they left the woods and headed down their street, snow was swirling everywhere. Ahead they could see their house's glowing lamplight. Their mom was waiting on their front porch. Hi, Mom. Hi, kids. Did you have a good day? Yes, said Jack. Pretty good, said Annie. I'm glad, said their mother. Welcome back. She held the door open, and Jack and Annie slipped inside. Their house felt extra warm and cozy. Good smells came out of the kitchen. Jack and Annie took off their snow-covered jackets, then headed up the stairs. In the hallway, Annie turned to Jack. Merry Christmas, she said simply. Merry Christmas. Annie slipped into her room and Jack into his. Jack closed the door and sat on his bed. He took his notebook out of his pack and opened it. His spirits sank. Except for the 3 rhymes, he had taken no notes on their journey. Not one. Exhausted, Jack lay back in his bed. He squeezed his eyes tight. He tried to remember the details of their adventure. He could feel the terrible chill of the great hall. He could hear the joyful music as the winged dancers danced around their circle. He could taste the sweet, bitter, spicy taste of the water of memory and imagination. Jack sat up. All at once he was very awake. He turned to the clean page in his notebook. He grabbed his pencil and he wrote. It all started when we saw the white dove in the twilight. Using his memory and his imagination, Jack kept writing, doing his part to keep the legend of King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, Merlin, and Morgan alive. As the snow swirled outside his windows, Jack wrote and wrote and wrote. He didn't stop writing until he had written down the whole story, his story, of their Christmas in Camelot. The end.